There's a genetic marker found nowhere else in the entire world. Not in Spain, Portugal's immediate neighbor sharing a peninsula and centuries of shared history. Not in France. Not in Morocco. Not in any population on any continent. Only in Portugal. And it almost certainly belonged to a people whose names a history never recorded, whose language was never written down, and who were absorbed by Rome 2,000 years ago. The Inquisition couldn't erase it. The Moors couldn't replace it. 5 centuries of empire couldn't dilute it. It is still there. That is where this story ends. But to understand how that is possible, you need to start with geography. A peer-reviewed paper in Genome Biology described the Iberian Peninsula using a specific term. They called it a genetic cul-de-sac, a dead end. Migrations arrived from the east, hit the Atlantic Ocean, and could go no further. Whatever genetics walked into Portugal tended to stay in Portugal. The quantified consequence? Portugal and Spain share only about 2 genetic common ancestors with other European populations over the last 1,500 years. Most European pairs share between 2 and 12. The Iberian Peninsula is an outlier by every measure, and Portugal is the deepest point of that outlier. Every migration that reached Portugal stayed. Every wave that hit the Atlantic coast deposited its genetics and couldn't wash back out. Portugal is not genetically unusual because of anything its people chose. It is genetically unusual because of where the continent ends. When a scientific paper reaches for the word cul-de-sac about a living nation, it is not writing a travel metaphor. It is naming a mechanism that has been running for thousands of years. Everything that follows flows from that single geographic fact. Go back 20,000 years. The cul-de-sac was running long before there was a Portugal to name it. Between 26,000 and 20,000 years ago, the last glacial maximum, most of Europe was uninhabitable. The populations that survived contracted into warm refugia. Portugal was one of those pockets. The people who sheltered there are called Magdalenian hunter-gatherers. When the ice retreated around 14,000 years ago, those survivors expanded northward and repopulated the continent. Portugal has been continuously inhabited for 400,000 years. The oldest human fossils there, in Aroeira Cave, date to exactly that. The chain of biological inheritance running from an Ice Age pocket to a person alive today in Lisbon is not a metaphor. It is a measurable genetic signal. The Neolithic farming wave diluted the Magdalenian signal across continental Europe. But in Portugal, sealed by the cul-de-sac, the Magdalenian ancestry survived in higher proportions than in the populations the survivors had repopulated. The people who gave Europe its post-glacial ancestry preserved more of the original Ice Age signal than the Europeans they resettled. The Ice Age survivors who repopulated Europe moved in 2 directions. One was eastward and overland, the expansion that seeded Central Europe. The other is one that archaeologists suspected for decades but could not confirm until ancient DNA made it measurable. They moved north along the Atlantic coast. The western seaboard of Europe, Portugal, the Bay of Biscay, Brittany, Ireland, Western Britain shows a pattern of genetic connection that makes no sense if you only look at land routes. Bronze Age individuals from Western Ireland share ancestry proportions with Bronze Age individuals from Iberia that are closer than either shares with contemporaries in Central Europe. The sea was not a barrier, it was a road. The 2022 Patterson et al. Study in Nature, analyzing over 1,600 ancient genomes from across Europe, found a distinct Atlantic Bronze Age ancestry component moving along the western coastal corridor from Iberia to Scotland, absent from Central Europe at the same period, whose deepest roots trace back to the Iberian Refugium. The people who built the megalithic monuments along the Atlantic coast, the dolmens of Brittany, the passage tombs of Ireland, the stone circles of Western Britain, were, in part, biologically connected to the same coastal tradition whose southern anchor was Portugal. There is a specific irony in this that the cul-de-sac frame makes precise. The genetics that the cul-de-sac trapped and concentrated inside Portugal, the population that stayed, preserved the deepest version of the ancestry those travelers carried north. The cul-de-sac and the highway were the same geography. One direction sealed ancestry in. The other sent it north along the coast, where it built monuments that nobody connected to Portugal for 4,000 years. Which brings us back to the marker found nowhere else on Earth. There is a HLA genetic marker, a 25B18DR15, found in Europe only in Portugal, and a second, A26B38DR13, found nowhere else in the entire world. Both are thought to reflect ancestry from the pre-Roman peoples of southwestern Iberia, the Cynetes and the Oestrimnis, tribes who lived in what is now the Algarve and Alentejo, before Rome arrived. They left no written records. Their language is undocumented. Their kings are unnamed, but they left a genetic signature that modern immunogenetics can detect, and that no subsequent wave of history, Roman, Visigoth, Moorish, Inquisition, Empire, erased. When I first read Found Nowhere Else in the Entire World in a genetics paper, what it required was not surprise, but a second reading, because that is a genuinely unusual scope of claim in population genetics, where almost everything has a parallel somewhere. It means that every person carrying this marker is, through some chain of descent, connected to the pre-Roman people of southwestern Portugal. The Cynetes and Oestrimnis vanished from every historical record. Their genetic signature did not vanish from the people who came after them. What does it mean that the DNA preserved what the historical record erased? Is the genome a more honest archive than any document? Share your thoughts in the comments, because the Portuguese case makes the answer matter. The people who left the deepest genomic mark on Portugal, 538 years of rule, longer than the entire span of the United States, left almost no detectable genetic trace. The Moors ruled Portugal from 711 to 1249 CE. Their occupation produced the azulejo tiles on every historic building in Lisbon. It embedded Arabic words invisibly into Portuguese. Alface, the word for lettuce. Almofada, pillow, açúcar, sugar. It built irrigation systems still operating in the Alentejo today. The genetic signal of all of that is approximately 0 in northern Portugal, approximately 5 to 10% in the south, concentrated in the Algarve, where the Moorish presence was deepest and longest. The mechanism. The Islamic population in Iberia over 5 centuries was mixing with the local population generation by generation, becoming genetically more Iberian than North African. When the Reconquista expelled the Moors, the people who left were already predominantly descended from the Iberians they had ruled. The Alhambra in Granada is 800 years old and still standing. The Arabic vocabulary is in every Portuguese sentence spoken today. The genome of the people who built all of this is near absent in the north and modest in the south. Culture outlasted DNA. The Moors shaped Portuguese civilization more profoundly than almost any other influence, and their genetic trace barely registers north of the Tagus River. I keep returning to what that means for how we use genetics to tell historical stories. The Moorish case is the clearest possible evidence that DNA and civilization are not the same archive. What they left behind is everywhere in the language and the tiles. What the genome preserved is almost none of it. The next chapter is the inversion of that, a case where the historical record was forced to go silent and the DNA kept speaking anyway. In May 1497, 20,000 people lost their identity in a single month. Spain had already expelled its Jews. Portugal gathered those who remained, approximately 20,000, intending their exile. Instead, King Manuel I forcibly baptized them all in 1 month. They became new Christians overnight, publicly Catholic. Secretly, many remained Jewish. The village of Belmonte in northeastern Portugal is the most documented case of what that secret looked like 500 years later. Without rabbis, without books, without contact with any other Jewish community anywhere in the world. They passed prayers orally through generations, prayers that mixed Hebrew words with Portuguese into forms that Hebrew linguists could only barely recognize. Mezuzot hidden behind Christian icons, Shabbat candles lit where no outsider would see. The genetic consequence of 5 centuries of secrecy and endogamy, marrying only within the community because an outsider spouse was an existential threat, is this. 93.3% of Belmonte's maternal lines belong to a single haplogroup. 30 individuals tested, 28 sharing the same maternal genetic line. That number is not a statistic about ancestry. It is a statistic about fear. 500 years of fear, compressed into a single maternal line. The Inquisition is still visible in the DNA of Belmonte, not as an absence, but as a concentration so extreme it constitutes one of the most severe genetic bottlenecks in any modern European population. Samuel Schwartz, a Polish mining engineer, documented the community in 1925, 428 years after the forced baptisms. In 1989, 492 years after, the Belmonte community officially returned to mainstream Judaism and established a formal synagogue. Inside that country, one passport, one language, one history, there are two genetic worlds divided by a line that is 800 years old. Northern Portugal carries R1b frequencies exceeding 90% in some areas, among the highest in all of Europe, reflecting Bronze Age Celtic ancestry so stable that 2,000 years of subsequent history barely moved it. The Algarve carries the highest North African genetic signal anywhere in Portugal. The line separating those two profiles maps almost precisely onto the furthest boundary of the Moorish occupation at its historical peak. The Reconquista drew a political line. The genome remembers it. The Cul-de-Sac sealed different genetic histories into different parts of the same country, and the boundary between them is not a cultural memory or an architectural style. It is a frequency shift in a haplogroup running roughly east to west across the center of the country, exactly where the frontier stabilized for long enough to become a genetic wall. Portugal built one of the largest empires in human history. Vasco da Gama reached India in 1498. Pedro Álvares Cabral reached Brazil in 1500. Portuguese traders arrived in Japan by 1543. At its peak, the empire touched 5 continents. Portugal introduced chili peppers to India, the slave trade to the Atlantic, Christianity to Japan, and smallpox to the Americas. It transformed the genetic history of Brazil, Angola, Mozambique, Goa, and Cape Verde permanently and irreversibly. Modern Portuguese people share fewer than 2 genetic common ancestors with other European populations over 1,500 years, among the least genetically mixed populations in Western Europe. The empire mixed outward. It did not mix inward. Modern Brazilians carry Portuguese, indigenous Amerindian, and West African ancestry across a population of 200 million. Modern Portuguese carry almost none of those genetic signals in return. The cul-de-sac that trapped Ice Age ancestry inside Portugal for 15,000 years was equally effective at preventing the genetic consequences of 5 centuries of empire from flowing back in. Portugal transformed the genome of half the world and came home almost unchanged. Portugal is a country where 40,000-year-old Ice Age ancestry is measurable, where genetic connections to Bronze Age Ireland run along a coastal highway that nobody mapped for 4,000 years, where a genetic marker unique in all the world belongs to a people whose names the history never wrote down, where 500 years of Islamic civilization left its word for lettuce in every kitchen and almost no trace in the genome of the north, where a village hid its identity for 5 centuries and the fear compressed into a single maternal line, where one of history's greatest empires went everywhere and came home genetically unchanged. Portugal sent its navigators into every ocean on earth. The ocean never sent anything back that stayed. If you have Portuguese blood or roots in Brazil or Angola or Goa, part of your genome may connect directly to a people whose names history never wrote down. The Ice Age is in there. The Inquisition is in there. The Empire is in there, and so is the reason it left almost no trace when it came home. Send this to someone who carries that without knowing it. The genome keeps going deeper the longer you look. Thanks for watching.